What would cause otherwise good, intelligent, highly esteemed physicians of our community to conceal child rapists? Yep, you guessed it. Religion. Mormon Church protocol requires bishops to withhold confessions of continued child rape from police and child protective services. They are instead instructed by the only true apostles and prophets of God to call an internal team of lawyers who help suppress the reports and conceal the abuse.
The policy of this church is to call what's called a helpline. When the bishop calls the helpline, it's my understanding that it goes to an employee of the helpline. The employee then calls the Curtin McConkie law firm and says, hey, we have this abuse situation in Arizona, and the attorney then calls the bishop and tells him what to do, which in this case was, don't report it.
Hello, church operator.
Hi, I'm trying to reach the Mormon abuse hotline.
Are you a bishop?
No, I'm not. I was just hoping to talk to someone on the helpline and get some information.
So we don't have an abuse helpline for just general membership. It's just for bishops or stake presidents.
This is not exclusive to the Mormon Church. Child sex offenders are often protected throughout the country by religious organizations via so-called clergy-penitent privileges, which allow religious leaders to turn a blind eye to child sex abuse, allowing these heinous acts to continue uninterrupted. This is altogether distinct from reasonable, rational protocols found in healthcare, therapy, and counseling, in which any suspicion of child abuse must be reported immediately. I'll now read you the original reporting, which was done by the Associated Press, telling the story of how two Mormon bishops, count them, two Mormon bishops who were likely reasonably good men, but who were instructed by a religious institution, in this case, the Mormon Church, to not tell anybody. Don't tell anyone that this poor little girl is being raped repeatedly for years. Don't tell anybody. The internal team of Mormon lawyers assured the bishops, you're not doing anything wrong. These protocols put in place surely by the highest authorities, these divinely appointed men, so-called, allowing this rape to continue year after year. The original article reporting these events is titled 7 Years of Sex Abuse, How Mormon Officials Let It Happen, written by Michael Resendez, written August 4th, 3 days ago. MJ was a tiny black-haired girl, just 5 years old when her father admitted to his bishop that he was sexually abusing her. The father, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and an admitted pornography addict, was in counseling with his bishop when he revealed the abuse. The bishop, who was also a family physician, followed church policy and called what church officials have dubbed the helpline for guidance. But the call offered little help for MJ. Lawyers for the church, widely known as the Mormon Church, who staffed the helpline around the clock, told Bishop John Herod not to call police or child welfare officials. Instead, he kept the abuse secret. Quote, they said, quote, you absolutely can do nothing, unquote. Herod said in a recorded interview with law enforcement. Herod continued to counsel MJ's father, Paul Douglas Adams, for another year and brought in Adams' wife, Liza Adams, in hopes she would do something to protect the children. She didn't. Herod later told a second bishop, who also kept the matter secret after consulting with church officials who maintained that the bishops were excused from reporting the abuse to police under the state's so-called clergy-penitent privilege. Adams continued raping MJ for as many as 7 more years into her adolescence and also abused her infant sister, who was born during that time. He frequently recorded the abuse on video and posted the video on the internet. Adams was finally arrested by Homeland Security agents in 2017 with no help from the church after law enforcement officials in New Zealand discovered one of the videos.
New Zealand police arrested a child pornographer and found the video that Paul Adams had made on his cell phone.
We could tell from the accent it wasn't Canadian, it was American, so we could narrow it down pretty quickly. It was quite good that they were able to do something with this video and track it down to Mr. Adams, but that's not always the case.
He died by suicide in custody before he could stand trial. The Associated Press has obtained nearly 12,000 pages of sealed records from an unrelated child abuse lawsuit against the Mormon Church in West Virginia. The documents offer the most detailed and comprehensive look yet at the so-called helpline Herod called. Families of survivors who filed the lawsuit said they show it's part of a system that can easily be misused by church leaders to divert abuse accusations away from law enforcement and instead to church attorneys who may bury the problem, leaving victims in harm's way. And in this case, 2 victims. And many more adjacent victims, likely. The helpline has been criticized by abuse victims and their attorneys for being inadequate to quickly stop abuse and protect victims. Yet the Utah-based faith has stuck by the system despite the criticism and increasing scrutiny from attorneys and prosecutors, including those in the Adams case. Quote, "I just think that the Mormon Church really sucks, seriously sucks," said MJ, who is now 16, during an interview with the Associated Press. Quote, "They are just the worst type of people, from what I've experienced and what other people have also experienced," unquote. MJ and her adoptive mother asked the Associated Press to use only her initials, in part because videos of her abuse posted by her father are still circulating on the internet. The Associated Press does not publish the names of sexual abuse survivors without their consent. William Maladin, an Arizona attorney representing the bishops and the church in a lawsuit filed by 3 of the Adams' 6 children, told the Associated Press last month that the bishops were not required to report the abuse.
And the statute as currently worded indicates very clearly that these bishops did nothing wrong. They didn't violate the law, and therefore they can't be held liable.
Maladin referred to the suit as a, quote, money grab. In his Associated Press interview, Maladin also insisted Herod did not know that Adams was continuing to sexually assault his daughter after learning of the abuse in a single counseling session. But in the recorded interview with the agent obtained by the Associated Press, Herod said he asked Liza Adams in multiple sessions if the abuse was ongoing and asked her, "What are we going to do to stop it?" At least for a time period, this is the bishop, Bishop Herod. Quote, "At least for a period of time, I assumed they had stopped things, and then I never asked if they picked it up again." In 2012, when Herod rotated out of his position as bishop of the Bisbee ward, and then they explain what a ward is, a Mormon jurisdiction similar to a Catholic parish, he told incoming Bishop Robert Kim Mousy about the abuse in the Adams household. Instead of rescuing MJ by reporting the abuse to authorities, Mousy also kept the information within the church. In a separate recorded interview with federal agents obtained by the Associated Press, Mousy said church officials told him he should convene a confidential disciplinary hearing for Adams, after which Adams was excommunicated in 2013. Mousy and other church leaders still didn't report Adams to the police. 2 years later, in 2015, Liza Adams gave birth to a second daughter. It took her husband just 6 weeks to start sexually assaulting her, recording the abuse, and uploading the videos to the internet. The revelation that Mormon officials may have directed an effort to conceal years of abuse in the Adams household sparked a criminal investigation of the church by Cochise County Attorney Brian McIntyre and the civil lawsuit by 3 of the Adams children. Who's really responsible for Herod not disclosing? McIntyre asked in the Associated Press interview. Is it Herod, who says he followed the church lawyer's instruction not to report the abuse to authorities? Or is it the people who gave him that advice? This is a quote from the abused MJ. Quote, "They just let it keep happening," said MJ in her Associated Press interview. They just said, "Hey, let's excommunicate the father." It didn't stop. "Let's have them do therapy." It didn't stop. "Hey, let's forgive and forget and all this will go away." It didn't go away, unquote. A similar dynamic played out in West Virginia, where church leaders were accused of covering up the crimes committed by a young abuser from a prominent Mormon family, even after he'd been convicted on child sex abuse charges in Utah. The abuser, Michael Jensen, today is serving a 35 to 75-year prison sentence for abusing 2 children in West Virginia. Their family, along with others, sued the church and settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. I'm skipping little tidbits here and there. Please read the full article. The lawsuit filed by the 3 Adams children accuses the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and several members, including bishops Herod and Mousy, of negligence and conspiring to cover up child sex abuse to avoid costly lawsuits and protect the reputation of the church, which relies on proselytizing and tithing to attract new members and raise money. In 2020, the church claimed approximately 16 million members worldwide, most of them living outside the United States. The suit by the family includes, quote, "The failure to prevent or report abuse was part of the policy of the defendants, which was to block public disclosure to avoid scandals, to avoid the disclosure of their tolerance of child sexual molestation and assault, to preserve a false appearance of propriety, and to avoid investigation and action by public authority, including law enforcement. Plaintiffs are informed and believe that such actions were motivated by a desire to protect the reputation of the defendants in this case being the Mormon bishops and the church." Very few of the scores of lawsuits against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints mention this helpline, in part because details of its operations have been a closely guarded secret. The documents in the sealed court records show how it works. Quote, "The helpline is certainly there to help the church keep its secrets and to cover up abuse," said Craig Vernon, an Idaho attorney who has filed several sex abuse lawsuits against the church. Vernon, a former member, routinely demands that the church require bishops to report sex abuse to police or state authorities rather than the helpline. The sealed records say calls to the helpline are answered by social workers or professional counselors who determine whether the information they receive is serious enough to be referred to an attorney with Curtin McConkie, a Salt Lake firm that represents the church. A document with the heading Protocol for Abuse Helpline Calls, which was among the sealed records obtained by the Associated Press, laid out the questions social workers were to ask before determining whether the calls should be referred to the lawyers. Mormon church officials in the West Virginia case said they did not recognize the protocol and could not authenticate it, but a ranking church official in a separate sex abuse lawsuit in Oregon confirmed that those answering the helpline used a written protocol to guide them. There's much more to this article. I encourage you to read it in its entirety.
They just said, hey, let's excommunicate her father. It didn't stop. Let's have them go to therapy. It didn't stop. Hey, let's forgive and forget, and this will all go away. It didn't go away. They just let it keep happening.